May it please the court. She sold the lies. She pays the price. In the spring of 2016, Julie Tam, the daughter of the defendant, was admitted to 3 of the best universities in the country. But as you'll learn throughout the course of today's trial, it wasn't because she earned it. It wasn't because she spent hours slaving over SAT prep tests or years training in her athletic ability. No, she was admitted because her mother, Melanie Tam, this defendant, sold a lie. You see, this defendant decided that her daughter was above doing honest work to get into college, above going anywhere other than Stanford or Berkeley. But most importantly, folks, she decided that she was above the law. And so she paid an organization $150,000 to make up her daughter's test scores, make up her daughter's athletic abilities. She paid them the lie. And then she did. She lied to Stanford, to Berkeley, to USC, to the public, to the U.S. Attorney's Office, and now, members of the jury, to you. Well, ladies and gentlemen, the lies end today. The law tells us you don't just get to lie to get your kids into college. Because when you do, when you scam, cheat, trick, deceive, when you pay people money to lie to colleges in order to get your kids admitted, that's called fraud. And as the government in today's trial, we've proven to you, beyond all reasonable doubt, that the defendant is guilty of fraud. To show you how, I'm going to walk through those 3 questions my co-counsel, Ms. Kohler, asked you at the beginning of this trial. What the defendant did, how the defendant did it, and why she did it. So first of all, what did she do? Why are we here? Well, members of the jury, I want you to take a look at Exhibits 4 and 5. These are checks that amount to $150,000. Checks that went from the defendant to 2 organizations called Front of the Classroom and Reach for the Stars. But what you learned in trial today is that that money going to those particular organizations, it wasn't random. We actually called Spencer Matthew, the CEO of those organizations, who told you that it's kind of well known in the defense's circle that those organizations have been defrauding colleges and universities for over a decade. So what would the defendant be doing giving all of that money to those organizations? Well, I want you to take a look at the date on Exhibit 4 and 5, January 2016. Because that's not random either. You see, in January of 2016, this defendant had a problem. Her daughter had all these dreams and aspirations of going to these top colleges, but she wasn't qualified. She didn't have any special sports talents, and she didn't have good test scores. But after January 2016, after those checks were cashed, suddenly the defendant's kid was a superstar. I mean, her resume said that she was an award-winning golf prodigy, and her test scores were in the 98th percentile. So members of the jury, let me ask you this. What do you think $150,000 bought the defendant? Well, if you listen to the defense's story, wasn't much. Just a little tutoring and a nice letter saying thank you for your donation. It's their contention that this millionaire with an unqualified child gave $150,000 to an organization that helps millionaires lie for unqualified children. The same year that her unqualified child was applying to college and was all for tutoring and charity. Members of the jury, that doesn't make any sense. It's not reasonable. Because $150,000 is not tutoring money. It's not charity money. It's the kind of money you pay when you want to sell a lie. And we know this because the defendant got what she paid for. After those checks were cashed, the defendant's daughter got into every single college she applied to. I want you to take a look at the verdict form that the judge handed you just a moment ago. Question 1 on that form asks you, did the defendant participate in a scheme to defraud? In other words, did the defendant pay people to lie for her child? And to that, you can check yes. 2. How did the defendant do this? I mean, how did the lies get to the colleges? Question 3 on that verdict form asks you about something called wire communications, which is a fancy way of saying electronics. Now, actually, both defense counsel and I already agree that the applications where the lies were, well, it was all submitted through an online portal. And so to question number 3, you can check yes. 3. Why did the defendant do this? Question 2 on that verdict form asks you about the defendant's intent. Did she know what she was doing when she sold those lies? Well, in order to figure out whether or not the defendant knew what she was doing, we're going to compare what a person who didn't know would have done to what the defendant did. And we're going to use the most basic example. I want you to take a look at Exhibit 10. This is the resume that we showed you earlier today. And when the defendant was on the stand, she actually admitted that some of the information in this resume were blatant lies. That whole golf section, lie. Now, if someone didn't know what was going on, if they didn't intend to commit fraud, and they saw what you're holding in your hands right now, Exhibit 10, well, they'd be very confused. They say this isn't true. They might call the organization and say, who put this here? At the very least, ladies and gentlemen, they delete it. What did the defendant do? Well, when she took the stand today, she said, oh, I didn't see it. Members of the jury, take another look at Exhibit 10. Because the part that the defendant is claiming that she just didn't see, it's not small. It's not one line. It's not a typo. It's an entire section with the headline that's bold and bullet points. Something that you could just miss. It makes more sense that the defendant saw that lie and she let it go through. And if she saw those lies and let them get to those colleges, that's evidence that she intended to commit fraud. And so to question number 2, you can check yes. Ladies and gentlemen, it makes sense that parents want to do everything in their power to support their children, and it makes sense that if you have more resources, you'll spend even more on your children. But what the defendant did crossed the line. Because she committed fraud, because she sold those lies, she took opportunities away from students who didn't break the law. Frankly, members of the jury, she took opportunities away from students who couldn't afford to. And if people like the defendant get to keep selling lies, people like me would have never gotten to go to law school. She sold the lies. That makes her guilty. We ask that she pay the price. And you find yourself. Thank you.